Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ivy, a senior manager in Singapore Business Federation, FTA Education and Outreach team. So before I start, first of all, I would like to thank the participants who previously signed up for our physical workshop. A sincere thank you for your understanding and patience as we've postponed the workshop a few times due to the COVID-19 situation. We have decided to do this digitally via a webinar today, as we recognize that this format is not ideal for hands-on workshop, but we don't know exactly when we can resume physical events. We think this is the fairest approach to conduct this via webinar at no cost to all who are keen to learn about FTA, Free Trade Agreement, and Tariff Finder. We are still exploring holding the physical workshop subsequently when we are able to do so, and you're welcome to sign up again for a more interactive section. I would also like to say thank you to our speakers from Enterprise Singapore too for taking their time out to conduct this webinar. In the meantime, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the Q&A box. And after this webinar, you are most welcome to email us on any Tariff Finder or FTA related question at fta@spf.org.sg. Once again, a big welcome to our Tariff Finder webinar. Our speakers will first introduce the basic concept of FTA to set the stage and relay it to Tariff Finder. Thank you, and without any further delay, I shall hand over to our speaker from Enterprise Singapore.
Okay, thanks, Ivy. Hi, everyone. I'm Mei Yan from Enterprise Singapore, and we want to thank SBF for organizing this Tariff Finder workshop as well. Okay, let me just go to my slide. Oops. Share my screen. Okay. Let me just try again. Okay. I think perhaps Tricia, would you like to bring up the slides?
Hi, okay, so yeah, I will share my slides on my side, so I'll just...
Okay,
yeah.
Can, thanks. Okay, so I'll be doing a short presentation for the first part of this webinar, and my colleague Tricia, she will take over the second part of this webinar and use the Tariff Finder to demonstrate how it can help you search for tariff information, HS code, and important regulations for your export.
Sure. Me, you can see my slides, right?
Yes,
okay,
I can.
Sure. Okay, good.
Can. Thank you. Okay, so next slide, please. Go on to so this is the agenda for today. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll just take you through the first part of this webinar, and from number 4 onwards, Tricia will take you through, okay? Yeah. So Enterprise Singapore is one of the economic agencies under the Ministry of Trade and Industry, or MTI, and ESG is the government agency championing enterprise development. So besides building capabilities, ESG also help companies to internationalize. FTAs is one of the tools that companies may tap on when they are ready to expand their business overseas. Okay. Next slide. We currently have 26 FTAs or EPAs, which is Economic Partnership Agreement, enforced with 65 trading partners. Now, the areas colored in dark gray are the markets that we have FTAs enforced with. Okay, next slide. Okay, the legal text and bite-sized information such as like infographics and step-by-step guide of all our FTAs can be downloaded from the ESG FTA website. Okay, the FTAs are categorized under bilateral FTAs or regional FTAs. Bilateral FTAs are agreements with one party. Although the EU-Singapore FTA includes all 28 EU member states, but because they are under a common customs union, hence this FTA is considered a bilateral FTA. And regional FTAs are agreements with many parties, for example, ASEAN, ASEAN Plus, FTAs, and the CPTPP. Okay, next. MDI is also constantly looking at expanding our network of FTAs. Singapore has concluded negotiations for the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, and we also have ongoing FTAs under negotiation with the EAEU, the Pacific Alliance, and Mercosur. Under the RCEP, other than the RCEP, if you are exporting to these markets, right, and are facing issues or high tariffs for your products, do let us know. Because as these FTAs are still undergoing negotiations, right, we can actually get these products to have preferential tariffs once it's concluded and implemented. Okay, next please. Free trade agreements is actually a legally binding agreement between two or more countries to reduce or eliminate barriers to trade and facilitate the cross-border movement of goods and services between the territories of the parties. Now, on the left column are some of the chapters that you will see in an FTA legal text, and the right column is a brief description of what's covered in the respective chapters. Now, in my following slides, I'll touch on the tariff concessions for eligible exports and rules of origin. Okay. So FTA help to make your product more competitive in FTA partner countries. And the next slide shows that this is a typical pricing model of a product which an importer will take into consideration when they are sourcing for goods, either domestically or from overseas. So if they source from overseas, there may be duties imposed on the goods, depending on what product it is and the HS code of the product. So these duties are usually collected by customs authority in the importing country. Excise duties and internal taxes are imposed on locally produced and foreign produced goods. Okay, but customs duties are only imposed on imported goods. This is where the FTAs may be applied to reduce or eliminate the duties. So FTA creates a level playing field for foreign goods vis-a-vis domestic goods. And as such, it enhances the price competitiveness of your products in the region. Next slide, please. So for example, if a company prints commercial catalogs with the HS code 4911109036 in Singapore and export them to Australia, the customs duties for commercial catalog under this HS code is 5% in Australia. Now, under both AANZ FTA and CPTPP, AANZ is the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand Free Trade Area, and CPTPP is the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, in which both Singapore and Australia are parties to. So under both FTA, the preferential tariff is 0%. So the tariff savings to the importer in this example is 50,000. Okay, for if they export approximately like $1 million of commercial catalog to Australia in a year. So at this point, the product may enjoy the same benefits under these two FTAs. But as we know, the product needs to meet certain criteria in order to enjoy preferential tariff treatment in the importing country. So we have to check the rules of origin criteria for this product, HS code under the two FTAs. So in the next slide, you will see that although under both FTAs, the preferential tariff is 0%, however, the rules of origin, right, under A and Z FTA and CPTPP for this product are different. So under A and Z FTA, the manufacturer actually have a choice to choose whether to use a regional value content rule of not less than 40% or a change in tariff classification at the 4-digit level for non-originating materials. Whereas under CPTPP, the rule is only a change in tariff classification at the 4-digit level. Okay, so it really depends of which rules of origin criteria you are able to meet. Okay, so and then in order for the importer to enjoy preferential tariff treatment, the product also needs to be exported with the relevant document. If you are using ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand FTA, it has to be, there needs to be a Form A and Z issued by Singapore Customs. This is called Preferential Certificate of Origin. And, you know, at the point of import, when the importing customs authority receives this form, then it will accord a preferential tariff treatment to the product. For CPTPP, it's a self-certification regime, meaning that the exporter would have to self-certify that the product has met the rules of origin criteria. And the information that you need to input on this form or on your document, you have to refer to Annex 3B for a set of data required to be on the form. Okay, so which FTA to use really depends on what is the rules of origin that you can meet as well. So as you can see, for these two FTAs, the member states are, the parties to the FTAs are different. So it depends on where you source your material from that you can use to accumulate in terms of like, in terms of our A and Z FTA to accumulate to meet the rules of origin criteria, or the change in tariff classification, because the tariff classification change only affects the non-originating materials. Okay. So as you've noted in the examples provided earlier, that whether there's preferential tariff for a product depends on the HS code of the product. Which rules of origin criteria you need to fulfill in an FTA is also determined by the HS code of the products. Hence, to use FTA for your exports, it is very important to correctly identify the HS code of your products. Okay, so HS codes or Harmonized System code is an international nomenclature developed by the World Customs Organization for the classification of goods. It is not just used to classify goods and determine the tariffs, preferential tariffs, and rules of origin for goods. There may be other non-tariff measures applicable to certain goods depending on the HS codes of the products. Some examples of non-tariff measures are importation of goods only by licensed importers, okay, goods having to adhere to domestic sanitary and phytosanitary measures, criteria before they can be imported, or goods having to meet technical regulations before they are allowed in the country. Okay. So HS codes are used principally for customs purposes and are required in the permit declaration of goods. And based on HS codes, you may also find out if you need to comply with other non-tariff measures before exporting the products into the country. Now, HS codes govern the entire regulatory measures that a good is subject to, both tariff and non-tariff. They are also updated every 5 years. The current version of HS code is HS 2017. And globally, the HS code is harmonized at the 6-digit level, but among the 10 ASEAN countries, the harmonization of the HS code is at 8-digit level. Okay, it's also called the ASEAN Harmonized Tariff Nomenclature, AHTN. Okay, next slide. So an example is this product with HS code 16041110. Okay, it is under Chapter 16. Okay, so the description is very broad. It's preparations of meat, of fish, or of crustaceans, mollusks, or other aquatic invertebrates. Okay, when it comes down to heading, it is the first 4 digit of the HS code, which is 1604. and it's further subdivided to subheading, which is the first 6 digit, okay, and this is salmon. And under the national heading, it's 16041110. So for this product, among ASEAN countries, for this particular product, we all use 16041110. However, globally, then it will only be harmonized at the first 6 digit level, 160411. So this product is actually canned salmon. Okay, next. I'll move on to rules of origin criteria. So rules of origin is actually a set of criteria set up to determine a product's originating status. Okay, and the guiding principle is that it's either to, it's for the determining whether a product originates from Singapore. Okay, so it's either wholly obtained or not wholly obtained. If it is not wholly obtained, then it must have undergone some substantial transformation. Okay. So the next slide will show you okay, so how products can be, how the rules of origin are categorized. Okay, so for wholly obtained products, right, it's for example, plants and plants products harvested, picked or gathered there, or live animals born and raised there. Okay, non-wholly obtained products, and then they need to be substantially transformed, will be depending on whether there is a change in tariff classification, regional value content, have they met a certain percentage, or there's also this process rule which applies to mainly chemical products or textile products. I'll first go on to change in tariff classification. Okay. So change in tariff classification, as the name implies, focus on the change in HS codes of the non-originating materials to the HS code of the finished product. Okay, so I have this example here. If a company imports malt not roasted, okay, which is non-originating, and then after a production process, it becomes stout. If you take a look at the HS code, it's from 1107.10 to 2203.00. So there's a complete change in the HS code of from the materials to the finished product. Hence, in this case, the product can be deemed as originating. Okay, of course, it's provided that in the FTA, the rules of origin says that there needs to be a change in the HS code. Okay, the next product is woven fabric of polyester with the HS code 5513.11 to dyed woven fabric of polyester 5513.21. Do note that the change in HS code is only at the 5th and the 6th digit, means it's a subheading change. So really depends on the FTA, rules of origin criteria. If the particular FTA that you're using says that it has to be a change at the 4-digit level, then this manufacturing production, this process, right, would not qualify it to be originating because the change is not at 4-digit level. But if the rules of origin criteria under this FTA that you are using says that the requirement is at the 6-digit level change, then you'll fulfill the rules of origin criteria in this case. Okay, next I'll move on to regional value content rule. So regional value content rule qualifies the origin of the product based on the value of the work done in the exporting country, which should also be the last country of substantial transformation. And the focus is what is the proportion of local value in the finished product. Okay, besides this formula based on FOB price, it can also be based on an ex-factory price or ex-factory cost, and still, it depends on the FTA which formula they use. So essentially, the formula is that you take the originating raw material cost plus direct labor cost plus direct overhead cost, profit, inland transportation cost divided by the FOB price. Okay, so I have an example here. Assuming the FOB price of a plastic door made in Singapore is $10, and the following are the cost of the materials. Okay, so we have metal parts from ASEAN member, plastic parts also from ASEAN member, hinges was imported from Japan. So if you are using ATIGA, ATIGA is the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement. That is the FTA among the 10 ASEAN countries. Okay, so if you're using this FTA and to calculate the regional value content, meaning you can take in the ASEAN, the parts originating from ASEAN to calculate your value content, right? You'll get 60% of FOB price. So for ATIGA, general rules of origin for original value content is at least 40%. Hence, in this case, this the manufacturing process here in Singapore, right, with the value add will qualify for Form D. Okay, I'll move on to process rule. As mentioned earlier, process rule usually applies to chemical products or textile products. So it has a specific production process, such as like chemical reaction or transformation to occur, and as defined in the agreement. So take, for example, this product, which is a boys shirt with HS code 6105.90. It has these two rules of origin criteria. So one of them, the second one, is actually a change in HS classification, as we've mentioned earlier, but in this case, it is a change in chapter. But the manufacturer can also choose the alternative rules of origin criteria, which is regional value content of at least 30% based on X factory, provided that the good is cut or knit to shape and assembled in the territory of one or more of the parties. So in this case, the cutting and the knitting are the process rules for this product, okay, in order to meet the rules of origin criteria. Okay, so in terms of planning to use your FTA, you do need to take note of like what is the current trade flow of your physical goods. For example, like where are your goods manufactured and where is it going to be exported to? So this will first help to determine which FTAs you can tap on. And then next is that, is there a customs duty imposed on your goods in the destination country? So for some products, the importing duties may be already zero. Okay, so if it is already zero, then there's perhaps no need to use FTA unless that is a part which in the importing market, it will be used to be manufactured into a finished product. So in that case, your importer might request for a preferential certificate of origin from you. And also, so very importantly, we mentioned about HS code earlier. So whether with the HS code of your product, right, you'll be able to check whether the product is committed for preferential tariff treatment under this FTA, and then is it reduced tariff or is it zero tariff? Okay, and also the rules of origin criteria that you need to meet. And if you're unable to meet the rules of origin criteria, perhaps you need to make some changes to your supply chain for the materials, where you source your material from, and see if you can try and meet the rules of origin criteria. Okay, so I think at this point, that's all I have for now. I'll hand over the rest of the presentation to my colleague, Tricia, to go through with you how you may use the Tariff Finder to obtain the necessary FTA information. Okay, thank you, Tricia.
Thank you, Mian.
Thank you.
So, hi, everyone. So I'm Tricia, also part of the FTA team, and Mian is my colleague. Thank you so much for signing up for this webinar, and we hope that we will be able to shed light on the Tariff Finder tool and also on FTAs. So I understand that some companies or some users have actually tried to register for an account, but there are some technical issues. We will get back to you once we hear back from the service provider. But before that, yeah, I think it will be a good time now anyway just to go through it for those with the account already. And if you've been already a user of the Tariff Finder, thank you very much. We hope that it has been useful to you. So earlier, Mian has actually touched on a very quite in-depth, like the FTA basic concepts, and we thought that it was important to lay those out because the Tariff Finder does apply those concepts. And FTA itself is a technical subject, and while the Tariff Finder is meant to be very user-friendly and easy to follow, there needs to be a certain understanding of how an FTA works to really understand the information that's presented on the Tariff Finder. So I will go to the Tariff Finder later on to show you a demonstration with some examples. And before this, I just wanted to go through the registration in case some of us were wondering. So on the right hand side of my current slide, I have a QR code. If you're interested to use your mobile phone to access the Tariff Finder, you can do so. It is mobile responsive. And otherwise, you can also sign up for an account or access through our website. So enterprisesg.gov.sg/FTA. And you navigate over to the Tariff Finder and you can register now and access now. Okay, so once you register, you will be required to key in some information. Make sure that you key in all the information before you can proceed on to the next page. And another thing about the Tariff Finder is that it is actually a service exclusive for our Singapore-based companies. I'll show you more information on over the next few slides. Okay, so once you receive an activation email, click on the link to activate your account, and then you can already log in to start finding the information you need. The more savvy ones, or actually I find it easier to just save this address on my favorites bar on my Explorer so that I can just directly access the Tariff Finder instead of going through the website at ESG. So this is the website. Okay, so if you use the Tariff Finder, you will have noticed that there are two logos on top. So one is Enterprise Singapore, the other one is Mendel. So Mendel is actually a German-based company that we work and collaborate through this project, and they are a specialized data content provider in the field of global customs and foreign trade measures. So they are actually people who are also experienced and who are familiar with foreign trade measures, not just a company that has data, if you know what I mean. So this Tariff Finder was actually established since 2017, and up to date, we already have quite a sizable number of companies using, and the service serves Singapore-based companies only. So if you were to travel to Malaysia after the lockdown eases, and if you were to try to access this from overseas, you will not be able to because it's restricted geographically. Another issue with MNCs, if you are trying to use this service, right, is that if your server is located overseas, you might have some technical issues trying to sign up because the system recognizes your IP address as one that is not of Singapore. So that may be an issue as well. But if you face the issue, let us know and we'll rectify it for you. We can do some whitelisting in the backend. So just a little bit about who is providing the information. So everything that you see on here is look and feel of Enterprise Singapore, but the information is provided by Mendel, who is our service provider. They also have private and public clients. So we are one of their clients in the public sector. So if you have an export question, feel free to use it. It's available 24/7. We have 4 modules. The first one, nomenclature, which Mian talked about earlier, right, about HS codes and why it's important, because it's always important to identify the correct HS code so that you know what are the tariffs and rules of origin that apply to your product. So the second module will be tariff and taxes. Although FTAs cover primarily customs duty reduction or elimination, we also included taxes within the Tariff Finder so that a company or user can calculate the total landing cost that the importer will be paying. So this is included here. And the third module is rules of origin, because recognizing that you want to use an FTA, you have to meet the rules of origin. So we have also provided a section here where you can go in and you can find what are the rules that apply. You don't even have to go into an FTA legal text. The fourth module, import formalities. So these are just, this section provides high-level information on certain regulations or documentary requirements that are required if you were to import something into a country, say Thailand, China. We have over 120 other countries for import formalities. If you're interested after the webinar, you can also access a Tariff Finder video. The slides will be shared with participants after the webinar. You can watch the video to have a better idea of how you can use the tool as well. Okay, so just to summarize what Mian has gone over earlier, right, in the basic concepts. So number one, when a company is always trying to assess like what FTA should I use and they're interested to use an FTA, number one, it's always what FTA applies to my business model, right? So if I'm exporting so if my product is made in China, I'm exporting to Vietnam, then of course the ASEAN-China FTA comes into mind. So it depends on the business model that is being considered here. Right, that's step one. Number two, okay, now that I know maybe I'm going to Vietnam, right? I have a customer in Vietnam, I want to import this certain product into Vietnam. Then I need to check the HS code internally as well as maybe using the Tariff Finder to check that, okay, the version of my code is correct for Vietnam. So Mian earlier mentioned, right, that HS codes are developed by the World Customs Organization. It's basically an international language for products. So you say a certain number of codes or certain number of product, certain numbering, and everyone knows like it's a chocolate product or it's a food product. When it comes to importing into a country, it's important to always make sure that the version of the code up to the 8th digit is adapted correctly to the importing country. Okay, so number three is, okay, now that I know I want to use an FTA, there's a tariff concession that my importer can enjoy, then I want to know what the rules are and if I can meet the rules. So the Tariff Finder really helps with steps 1, 2, and 3. So steps 1 and 2 and 3 are really what we're going to focus on with the Tariff Finder. 4 and 5 are more operational, you know, like really doing the verification and submitting applications for a preferential certificate of origin with Singapore Customs, or self-certifying if the FTA requires so. And the outcome of using an FTA is, of course, allowing the importer in the importing country to enjoy a lower customs duty rate. So that is always the outcome when an FTA is applied. And in such a way, it makes your product more competitive price-wise compared to other producers who might be also bringing the same product into a country. Okay, so just wanted to give you an overview of the examples that I will show today using the Tariff Finder. So the first one will be Singapore to China. It's a pepper sauce. And throughout the examples, right, I will show you different features and functions of the Tariff Finder. So that's the main goal here with the different various examples here. Second one will be from Singapore to US, and it's a pharmaceutical related product. The third one is from China to Vietnam, where maybe you have an OEM and you are a Singapore-based company, but your goods are shipped directly. How do you search for that on the Tariff Finder? And number 4 will be from Singapore to Vietnam, and it's also a food product. And in this case, I'm very certain of my HS code and I want to search very quickly. So throughout these examples, I will just be showing you different features and functions, and hopefully you can find one that you find useful and that you can use to share with your colleagues as well with the information that you find. So right now I just switched over to my Tariff Finder screen. So just a second. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen now. Let me just go to the main page. Okay, so this is my login page. I already have my credentials in, so I'll just log in. And okay, I was doing a test earlier, so I have all my fields here. Okay, assuming we start afresh. Okay, so now I have, let's say I do some value adding process in Singapore, right? So I put in Singapore and then I'm going to China. Okay, so just to take a step back, I forgot to mention that this is actually the landing page once you log into the Tariff Finder. As I mentioned, there are 4 modules in the service, and you can actually hover over to see what each module represents. So nomenclature, basically commodities and tariff number, tariffs and taxes, regular and preferential tariffs, and this covers more than 150 destinations. Rules of origin, if you want to apply an FTA, what are the rules that must be met? And import and export formalities for 120 countries. I'll show you in more detail, not to worry. So the first example, Singapore to China. And in this case, right, I'm going to search using the nomenclature view. So the nomenclature view is very interesting. you can see that as you go down the list, right? As you go down the list here, the numbers become bigger and bigger, right? So it's chapter 1, and then we have chapter 97, 98, 99. As you go down the list, the product actually becomes more and more processed and more manufactured. So this is how the WCO has structured the nomenclature. And in this case, right, if you are new to the nomenclature, if you look at it, right, you actually note that I think there are more than 5,000 or 6,000 commodity groups, and it's being revised every year, every 5 years, as Mian mentioned earlier, right? So there are always new products coming into the market, and the WCO tries to keep up with that through revisions periodically. Okay, so let's say I'm based in Singapore, I'm a company based in Singapore, and I manufacture pepper sauce, and I want to export this to China. Okay, so I'm going to go into my nomenclature, and I know it's not a live animal, right? It's not a vegetable product, it's not an animal or vegetable fat product. It might be a prepared food stuff. So I'm going to click on this, and again, the way to read this, right, is in a logical vertical fashion. So you go down the list and you do an elimination. So it's not meat product, it's not sugar, it's not cocoa, and I finally arrive at edible preparation. So I click on this, and it's a pepper sauce. So it's not an extract, it's not yeast, it's a sauce, right? So I click on 2103. And again, I read it vertically. So it's not soya sauce, it's not tomato ketchup, it's not mustard flour, it's other, because mine's a pepper sauce. Okay, and then it's not gourmet powder, it's not an aromatic bitter, it's under other. So I click on this. So once I select the code, I arrive to the results page. Okay, here the code, right, is adapted according to what what China would accept, because we are going to export China. Okay, so this is China's version of the code. Okay, so the first section here, you see nomenclature. So this is a description of the product that you've selected earlier. Okay, and then the next section will be the duty section. So the duty section is where I want to spend a little bit of time just explaining what this means. Okay, so MFN. What is MFN? MFN basically means most favored nation. So this means that China imposes 12% customs duty on any country bringing pepper sauce to their country. So it doesn't matter whether it's a Singapore pepper sauce, it's a US pepper sauce, it's a Vietnamese pepper sauce, as long as it's going to China, it's going to be imposed with a 12% customs duty rate, unless there's an FTA that is applied. So here you see Singapore, China. Okay, Singapore, China, it's 0%. That means this pepper sauce is scheduled for preferential treatment. Preferential means special, like you have some preference. And under the agreement that Singapore has with China, it's 0%. The agreement that ASEAN and China has, where Singapore is a member of, obviously, it's also 0%. Okay, so this means that if you are a Singapore manufacturer of pepper sauce and you export this to China, using an FTA, either the bilateral FTA where Singapore and China is a member of, or applying the ASEAN-China FTA, allows you to enjoy a 12% customs duty savings for your importer. So this is what it means and how you read it. You can read it in kind of like a triangular form. So it's like ASEAN, China, free, Singapore, China, free, Singapore, China, MFN, 12%. So MFN basically means that any country who is a WTO member country will enjoy the same treatment. So, so just case in point, right? If you are North Korea, for example, they're not a WTO member, right? If North Korea has pepper sauce going to China, then of course the MFN doesn't apply to them because they are not supposedly to enjoy the MFN treatment. Okay, so 12% is what China imposes on all countries bringing pepper sauce unless they have an agreement with them. So another thing that I wanted to show here, which is interesting, is look at this additional duty US, 20%. So you know about the US-China trade war, right? So this Tariff Finder here, right, this section is telling you that if a US origin pepper sauce is going into China, they have to pay an additional 20% duty on the pepper sauce. So an importer in China bringing in American US origin pepper sauce has to pay 12% plus 20%. So that's 32%. So if you are a company, right, manufacturing pepper sauce, you know that, okay, wow, so my competition is actually having all this kind of barriers in terms of tariffs, because now I know that if my importer were to bring in US pepper sauce, they have to pay 32%, 12% plus 20%. Whereas if I use an FTA, right, I can allow my importer to bring in this product at 0% with an FTA. So this is how we would interpret this section. And the rest of the section, the rest of the countries here, right, actually list what other agreements does China have with other countries. So we know that, for example, China has an agreement with Australia and it's also free. So we know that Australian origin pepper sauce going into China is also 0% if an FTA is applied. So you have a good sense of your competitors, right, in other countries, how much the importer in China would have to pay. And the whole list goes on, and it's quite interesting. So do take a look as well. Okay. The other part that I want to show is, okay, so taxes and charges, VAT rate. So you know that China has a VAT rate of 13%, and rules of origin. Okay, so here at one glance, you might ask, okay, so I know about FTAs, I know like I can use it, but like which FTA do I use? Because here it says that both are free, right? So which one do I choose? Of course, it depends on your supply chain model. Over here, and it also depends on the rule. So just to show you, right, if you don't use the Tariff Finder, it's okay. If you prefer to look in the legal text, that's also possible. So just to quickly show you, this is our FTA website. And I will show you the legal text if you prefer not to use the Tariff Finder. You may have to go through a whole document of pretty lengthy words. So this is the legal text that I'm accessing right now, and I will just show you product-specific rules. Okay, so this is ASEAN China, and this is the Rules of Origin chapter. And it tells you, okay, for each item, what is the rule that applies? Okay, so it's a whole long document. And this differs from FTA to FTA, meaning that, for example, CPTPP is an agreement between other country and different members, right? So the chapter on the specific rule will also differ. So you cannot assume that what is offered under ASEAN China is offered the same under a CPTPP agreement or the US-Singapore FTA agreement, okay? And hence, when you use the Tariff Finder, right, you can see that the rules are all laid out here according to what the FTA is. So here is ASEAN China, and then here is China-Singapore FTA. Okay, so you can see what the rules are. And over here for ASEAN China, right, it tells you that, okay, the rule is not less than 40%. So it's an RVC rule, as what Mian has shared earlier, or change in tariff classification, in this case at the 6-digit level. China-Singapore FTA says it's a regional value content or not less than 40%. So if you were to use ASEAN China, you have a choice because it's an OR rule. So you can use an RVC rule or a change in tariff rule. But if you use the China-Singapore FTA, then the rule says it must be a 40% rule. Okay, so next we move on to the next section, which is the import formality section. Another thing to note about the Tariff Finder is, okay, so when you remember we came to this result page and look at this, this is at the 8-digit level, okay, so this is product specific, okay, even for taxes and charges and rules of origin. But when you come to the import formality section, note that this is at the 4-digit level. Okay, this means that the information is provided more at a high level. It's not product specific, okay? So the import formality section is providing high level information on what would apply to a certain category of product. It's not to the specific product. Why is this so, you might ask, right? Why is this not provided specific to the product? Because regulations are not always tied to a specific product. For example, let me show you. So if I click on import procedure, right, I can't attach like an 8-digit number to an import procedure. Whereas you should read this as high level and always clarify this with the importing country or importer as well on the ground. These are information that we felt that our companies find it difficult to find even through a Google search, because it might be in Vietnamese, it might be in another language that we are not familiar with, right? So this provides a head start to in your conversation with a business partner or your importer, And do take advantage of the information here. It's quite detailed. I will show you one section which I thought was interesting. Okay, so now remember we're still looking at China. So this is going into China, right? And I will show you this section. I just found it this morning as well because this is constantly updated. Okay, country of origin labeling. Okay, you note here, it says recently goods originating in Taiwan are subject to stricter examinations regarding indication of their origin. So you know how recently there's a lot of talk in the news about how Hong Kong and China are being watched by the US. And so even for Taiwan, right, I think where there are such like exports of goods and like where in this situation, it's always important that the origin of a product is clear. It's always advisable to always make sure that the packaging or the merchandise, right, corresponds to the origin stated on the commercial documents. So even such information, right, is important to note, and it does remind you on the Tariff Finder here. So this is something that I wanted to point out today. Labeling of foodstuffs. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you is, hang on, let me just, okay, so let me just close this section. Okay, so I've just closed the overview. There's a lot of things, so you can even find out like what free trade zones are in China and so on and so forth. And the next part will be general requirements and specific requirements. So if you click on it, note that the information is provided still at high level, but as much as possible, details have been provided here for our companies to note. Okay, what is the name of the Chinese document for registration of foreign exporters of particular foodstuffs? What's the processing time? And okay, in case of dairy products. Okay, so it will be quite broad. You will find that the import formalities is not specific to the item that's being searched. Just note that it is at the 4-digit level because we had some feedback from companies, and so I just wanted to highlight that, that difference. Okay, so now I will show you another example. So now I'm going from Singapore to the US. Okay, and my product in this case is actually a pharmaceutical related product. So it's a gauze with an adhesive layer. So the first time we searched, right, we used the catalog. If I can just, okay, so I use the catalog here. But now I actually want to search by the first 4 digits of my HS code. So I know that it's 3005, but I don't want to go and click everything. Okay, so I click on search. So once you click on search, you click in, you put in 4 digits, right? You can then go in further to select the specific code. And in this case, it's not, my product is a gauze, yes, it's a dressing, but it's not impregnated with pharmaceutical substances. So I'm going to click on other. And then now I come to my results page. And again, it's a nomenclature, which is the description and the duties. Okay, so earlier, Mian also did mention something about do check the FTA and the MFN. If the MFN is already free, there is no need to apply for an FTA. Okay, so if you were to use the Tariff Finder, you can also find this piece of information. One thing to note about the Tariff Finder as well, so if you are very familiar with legal text and tariff schedules, you may do a cross-check with the actual tariff schedule. So just to show you what a tariff schedule is. So let me go to the US Singapore FTA. Okay, so I will show you the legal text. And okay, so this is the tariff schedule of the United States. Okay, you may be very familiar and you go through it. Do note that sometimes you may see a different base rate from the Tariff Finder. That's because the base rate can change and an agreement can be negotiated quite a few years prior, and the base rate, the MFN, might have changed already. So do note that if you're very well versed, then that's the difference that you might want to take note. So yeah, so in this case, right, if you see also a blank here, it doesn't mean that there's an error, it means that it's not excluded. It's not included in the commitments by the US. So the US did not commit to provide a preferential treatment for this product for two reasons. Number one, the MFN is already 0%, meaning they don't impose customs duty for this product, or they did not include this for any preferential tariff concession, for assuming the MFN is not free. Okay, so in this case, it's good news. You don't have to use an FTA. And again, tariffs, taxes and charges. Do note that with the USS FTA, right? Earlier I mentioned FTAs cover customs duties, but when it comes to the USS FTA, there's an exception, right? Because sometimes there are exceptions to the rules, and FTAs are very good at having all these exceptions here and there. So we really need to read the legal text properly. The Tariff Finder tries its best to convey these exceptions. Okay, so you look at taxes and charges. And I'm going to go straight to the merchandise processing fee. So if you know that if you've exported to the US, you would know that there's this MPF that applies. However, the Tariff Finder does include information that is crucial, because under the USS FTA, assuming you're applying this FTA, right, the MPF, the merchandise processing fee, is actually eliminated. Okay, so you can see here, blah, 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 under one of the following agreements are exempted from the MPF, and the USS Singapore is one of, FTA is one of them. So I know it's a lot of words on the Tariff Finder, but it's already a very redacted version compared to the legal text. So if you really read into it, right, you can really find out information. So now you can even tell your importer in the US, hey, if I use the USS FTA and you buy from me, we can actually even reduce the MPF to 0%. And sales tax, whether it's applied, the Tariff Finder says it's levied typically at the consumer level and do not become due at importation. And rules of origin, again, and import formalities. Import formalities is pretty much the same structure as the previous example. Just wanted to show you that no matter what you search, right, these four sections are always the same results that will come up, and the information would differ depending on the destination country. Okay, so now let me quickly just go into my third example. So now, right, assuming you are a Singapore-based company, but you don't manufacture here, you actually have OEM factories in China. Okay, and then it's shipped direct to your customer in Vietnam. And these are actually real examples where companies have approached us on. So that's why we're sharing today. And do note, right, this is country of origin. It's not the last country of export. Okay, so if you were to re-export through Singapore, note that it is the country of origin. So it's always where was the product last substantially transformed. Okay, so note this over here. Okay, so earlier we mentioned, we search by the commodity list here, and we also search by the first four digit, right? So now I'm going to search by entering a keyword. Okay, now my example is actually an electric water dispenser. So I put in the word heater. And I don't know which one it is. It sounds like it is everything here. Okay, so I'm going to choose this and I click search. Okay, and it's a water dispenser and it's for domestic use. Okay, so I click on this product code. Again, what I selected, and then China to Vietnam. It says MFN 20%, means 20% is what Vietnam imposes on any country of origin bringing this product into their country. And if I were to use the ASEAN-China FTA, in this case, I should be able to enjoy a 5% rate, meaning my savings would be 15%. Okay, and over here, I can also see what other agreements Vietnam is a member of. So they are also a member of the ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, the ASEAN, India, ASEAN, Japan. And again, if you don't see a figure next to, for example, ASEAN, India, it just means that it wasn't included in the agreement. Okay, so the whole list here. So apparently, now I also can find out that, okay, Vietnam and Japan, they also have an agreement. So you don't even have to do like a very intensive Google search. It tells you the information here. And taxes and charges, that rate for Vietnam is 10%. And then I have the rules of origin here. Rules of origin, would be, okay, for headings, the applied criterion is 40% rule. Or a good shall be treated. Okay, so in this case, right, if the heading is not this, which is not because it's A51610, so the rule would be either an RVC content rule or a change in chapter rule here. Okay, and import formalities, it's the same structure over here. And maybe I can show you something on the bill of lading here. Okay, so you might see a sample of a document here. Do note that, like, I also had some feedback from companies saying, like, how come I search for like a certain country but it shows me a sample document of another country? That's because it's just for a sample to show you how it looks, how it may look like. It doesn't mean that it is the document. So use it as a point of reference. And I would like to show you a last example. Here. Okay, so now I have Singapore to Vietnam. Okay. And I will, okay, so in this case, right, I'm a Singapore company. I know my product code very well. I'm very confident that I know the code. I can just key that in directly. So in this case, it's actually a grated cheese product. And I'll search, and I click search. Okay, so I bring in cheese in bulk, and then I grate it in Singapore. And then I export it to my customers in ASEAN region. So Vietnam is one of the countries that I export to. This is a nice example because I wanted to show you, if you search for Vietnam, right, this is from ASEAN to ASEAN. You can see a whole list of all the agreements that Singapore is a member with Vietnam. Okay, so there's, just to go through quickly, ASEAN, Australia, New Zealand, FTA, ASEAN, China, ASEAN, India, ASEAN, Japan, ASEAN, Korea. ASEAN Agreement, CPTPP. Okay, so 10% is what Vietnam imposes on any country or any origin of this grated cheese into their country. But if you have an agreement with Vietnam, right, they're actually offering a 0% rate. So this is how we would read it. And you might ask, which FTA do I use? Now, logically, right, when it's from an ASEAN country to an ASEAN country, we always try to use the ASEAN agreement, which is the ATIGA. It's one of the most commonly used agreements and an agreement that I would recommend most companies to start with if they are new to FTAs. However, unless, right, you are acknowledged that maybe from Vietnam it goes to Korea, then you might want to use the ASEAN Korea FTA, right? So again, it depends on the business model. And then I can also see a whole list of what other agreements Vietnam is a member of. South Korea, Japan, they also have Vietnam Eurasian Economic Union Free Trade Agreement, and so on and so forth. And Chile as well, 4%. Taxes and charges, 10% again, and rules of origin. Okay, so here at one glance, you can see all the rules that will apply. And here, the beauty of this is that you can tell that the rules are not always the same across the agreements. For example, you can see ASEAN India, right? The rule is 35%, and there must be a tariff change rule. So it's both must be met. It's not an or, it's an and. Whereas if you look at like ASEAN China, it's 40% or a change from any other heading. So the rules can differ from FTA to FTA, and using the Tariff Finder allows you to have information on what the rules are across different FTAs at one glance. Okay, and import formalities. And let's just open one and see. So this is Certificate of Statement of Product Standards. You might want to, your importer might want to discuss this with you. So in case that conversation happens, right, you can always refer to the Tariff Finder to see if, or pick out any information that may be useful in your discussion. Okay, and do note again that it's at the 4-digit level. And whereas the other sections are actually at the 8-digit level, which is more specific. Because as you know, right, as you go down the HS code and you go deeper and deeper, the product actually becomes more specific. Okay, and just to also go back to a more macro view on the Tariff Finder, right? So we've explored the details. Note the overall, the more macro things like, okay, the date of update. Our service provider Mendel tries to update this regularly. However, so many things can happen on the ground. Sometimes you need some time to make the updates on the system or on the database, but the date is always provided here, so you have a reference. And if you're interested in a report, right, let's say you want to share this with your colleagues, you might need to discuss this with the finance team or like the supply chain team. You can always save a report here. Click on this. Have I clicked on it? Okay, and then you go to your report section here, and you can always download a copy and you can share it internally. And you can also tell them to sign up for an account. So download it and then share it internally and have a discussion during your meeting. It might be easier, or you can always you can always show them live as well. If you're interested, you can also look at the updates here. And you can see that it's across like the whole world. Maldives is the one country that we don't have yet, but no company has asked on that as of now. And in case you have any technical issues and you need help, maybe late at night, because they're in Germany, right? So they work longer hours, as in hours that we don't work. You can also email to esg@mendel-online.com, and they will be able to also assist you. Or you can always send an email to us or through SPF. Either way works. So another thing that I wanted to share, I know it's been, we're almost going over to Q&A. I just wanted to show you one more thing. You know how we showed you the Tariff Finder as a tool, right? So if you're interested to use FTAs, you can use the Tariff Finder to do your research. The legal text is always a secondary or another option for you to check the information, right? You want to check a certain rate or certain product rule that applies. You can do that. When it comes to certain countries which are more progressive, right? Like for the US, just now we showed an example from Singapore to US. Remember we had a GAUS example. United States of America. Say you found the information here. Sorry. Okay, you found the information here and you're happy with it. But sometimes as like trade professionals or like people doing this day in and day out, right? Sometimes it's always good to have like a second or third point of reference. For countries which are more progressive, typically they have a lot of information on their website as well. And what I've done is earlier I went to look at the US CBP website. Okay, so they also have information on the US Singapore FTA. And over here, right, as I was going through, I saw that they actually have a Singapore FTA tariff tool. And when I clicked on that, I was led to another tool that the US offers. And feel free to also check against other tools. So what I'm saying is that the Tariff Finder is one avenue where you can search for information. One thing that I know people in the industry do as a best practice is always also to check various sources, as well as with the importer, just to make sure that the information is as accurate as can be. Because often when we're exporting things overseas or goods, right, it's a lot of money, and you just want to make sure that you've done all your due diligence and checks across the information that's available. For countries where like the information is not available in English, the Tariff Finder would definitely be a good way to search for the information. So in your own time, feel free to explore the Tariff Finder. Also feel free to explore our website with all the legal text contained. We have the whole list here. I think if I can go to the overview, or you can also see from here, right, the whole list of agreements on the left panel. And feel free to also search for the importing country's website. Maybe they have a certain tool that allows you to search for information on what the product code might be or the tariff rate. So in terms of answering the question of which FTA to apply, and it depends on the business model. In terms of answering the question of what is the tariff rate that applies, make sure that the HS code is as accurate as possible. Most companies, the bigger ones, they have like a classification person in the in-house. Otherwise, it's good to confirm this with the importer as well, or with the importing country as an option. So I hope that the tool was useful, would be useful to your company if you're thinking of exploring FTAs, or you're trying to just find information, you're interested to export products overseas. So I think I will now, we will now move on to Q&A, and Mian and I will be answering your questions. So let us just have a look at the Q&A right now.
Yes, I think there are questions on like how updated is the Tariff Finder and how often are the information being updated.
Okay, so let's go back to my screen here. Okay. So it's updated as SMN. SMN means every day. So you can see that it depends on what countries are looking. Of course, they cannot update the whole world at once, right? But over here, you can see that it's on a daily basis. And when you search for information, right, earlier, I think I did show you that, you can see when it was last updated as well. Let me just like quickly show you where I see it in case I was too fast. Okay, so you can see the date here. So it's always fairly recent. You wouldn't see something that is last year or like 2 years ago. So it's fairly frequently.
Yeah. I think there's also one question on the registration of account. And yes, it is email specific. So in a company, if each one of you have your own corporate account, you can actually sign up for the Tariff Finder separately or individually.
Yes, yes. And there are no limitations on the number of accounts per UEN. So everyone can have an account. There's no issue. Okay. So I think I'm looking at it. I'm just looking at the questions. Just 1 second. So there's one question on like import formalities, whether there is information on goods via sea or air. Yeah, I think as far as possible, like there's like airway bill information. I'm not sure if that is what you are looking for, but yeah, I think it does. It's not just by sea. Okay, and how frequently? I think we answered that.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question on certificate of origin. So we have a participant who asks, what if the product's certificate is USA, but we'll be exporting out again from China to Vietnam?
So in this case, I think the country of origin is US. But I think the question is like this product will be exported to China and then from China to Vietnam. And on the Tariff Finder, so which country should you put as the country of origin? I think in this case,
Yeah, okay. So in this case, it's always where the product was last substantially made or transformed. Yeah, so it's not the last country of export. Correct.
Yeah, so I think in this specific example, so it will be USA, from USA to Vietnam then, right?
Yeah. Correct. Okay, so next question. We have someone who asks, a participant who asks, is the Tariff Finder authoritative, accurate, and updated enough to only use as a primary guide? Okay, so the Tariff Finder, as I mentioned, right, is powered by Mendel, who is a service provider. It is not authoritative in the sense that it is information coming from Enterprise Singapore. However, we have appointed a vendor who is specialized in the data content, especially for such a technical subject, right? And they're also a service provider for the European Commission, which, if you know, right, it's called the Market Access Database, and that's been like 18, 20 years. So they've been the provider for the European Commission as well. So it's not authoritative, but it's provided as far as our knowledge of a provider out there who is well-versed with trade content and use it as a point of reference. Definitely do check other sources as not for the purpose of like with the perception that information is wrong, but rather to have a verification of the information. That is what my team does frequently as well. When a company asks us a question, we will definitely check the legal text, we'll check the local country's website if information is available, and we also use the Tariff Finder. Yeah. Okay.
I think there's a question on how do we know if the FTA is excluded or if it's zero MFN. So I think earlier your sharing, right, in your examples, for the pepper sauce, MFN is shown as 12%. So if in a case where MFN is zero, it will put as MFN free.
That's correct.
Yeah. And if it's excluded, then the MFN will show as, for example, a percentage, and the preferential rate will show as that same percentage, that same value.
Yes.
So which means that there is no preferential tariff under the FTA for that particular product.
That's correct. And just to illuminate what Mian has responded, right, I'll just show that again. So earlier I showed, right, don't know if this is, I think this should be an okay example. Okay, so I searched like Singapore to US, right, and this is for the gauze that, it was my second example. Sometimes if you don't see a figure next to the country, right, it's probably because the MFN is already 0%. So there's no point like using FTA, and that it probably is not included in the FTA tariff schedule as well. Just to show you, right? Sorry, as you can see, you know why this does not exist? Like earlier I mentioned, it's adapted to the country, right? So I cannot assume that the same code going to US is the same as Vietnam, and that's why you see that code right there. Let me try the code that I used earlier. Okay. Okay, so this is my water heater example. Yeah. So I think the question might be alluding to this, right? Like, how do I know if it's excluded? So if you don't see it here, that means it's not included, right, in the agreement, and the MFN will apply, so it's 20%. Assuming that you use ASEAN India. But in this case, right, you would use ASEAN agreement. You only use ASEAN India if, let's say, you know that from Vietnam it's going to India. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we are looking at the other question. Okay, so we have a question about HS code. The question is HS code independent of whether the product is registered or unregistered? Okay, yeah, it is independent. So HS code is basically an international language to classify products. Whether a product is registered or not is a separate issue, and that would have to be done separately, as in it's a completely separate discussion altogether for sure. However, right, I think the secondary point to this would be that if you are looking to import something like a pharmaceutical advice into a country, right, I think it's a good question, because you need to definitely register the product, especially for like pharma goods, right? And the registration would depend, of course, on the local country's adaptation of the code. And that's why we were saying that we're emphasizing how like important it is to make sure that the code is adapted and it's correct for importation into a certain country. Yeah.
So I think actually back to that question, whether the product needs to be registered or not, it also depends on like the HS code, and then this will be on depending on the domestic regulation. So yeah, the regulator would have like a list of products if it's required to be registered before it can be sold in their domestic market. So this is something which companies usually need to find out first before they export it to the market.
Okay. Thank you, Mian. So we have another question. This question says, if the product and brand is made in France and the goods are imported from Bangkok to Singapore. Oh, okay, I need to digest this a bit. It's a bit long. Just a second. Okay, so sorry, for the benefit of everyone. So I think this question is saying that this product is made in France and the goods are imported into Singapore through Bangkok.
Thailand, yeah.
Okay, yeah, which is Thailand. So made in France, through Bangkok and then to Singapore. And the product is modified in Singapore and then shipped to Brunei. Okay, so what is the country of origin? Okay, so basically there's some kind of transformation in Singapore and then it's shipped to Brunei. Okay, so it depends, right? So if the product is, of course, there's with the value add in Singapore, you want it to be of Singapore origin. But what determines whether it is Singapore origin depends on meeting the rules of origin, right? So is there at least, for example, at least 40% value add to the product in Singapore? If yes, and the FTA stipulates that yes, this is the rule, then we can say that yes, that is a Singapore origin product. If it doesn't meet the rules under the FTA, then it falls back to the French origin.
So just to add on, so in this case, we'll be looking at from Singapore to Brunei, and both are ASEAN member countries. So we can actually look at either ATIGA or any of the ASEAN plus FTA. And in our ASEAN and ASEAN plus FTA, the general rule, right, for most products, right, would be regional value content of at least 40% or a change in tariff heading. But again, this is a general rule. So for the specific product, we'll need to check the HS code. Okay, so in this case, because there's some modification of the product in Singapore, so again, we need to look at whether is it substantial or not to meet the 40% or a change in tariff heading before it can be deemed as a Singapore originating product, and then to use the ASEAN plus FTA for preferential tariff treatment in Brunei. So if it's not substantial, in this case, it will still be considered a non-Singapore originating product.
Okay, next question. So we have a question on, so this is a question on the example that I showed earlier. Okay, let's maybe do a quick example from Singapore to India. Okay, so this is a question just, it's a follow-up to the question I answered earlier on, like what's excluded and how to read the duty section. Okay, so in this case, I believe it's a cocoa product, chapter 18. Okay, hang on. Because I have the Q&A pop up on my box, so I kind of navigate around, sorry. Okay, so I searched for the cocoa product. So this product going to India is 30%. The bilateral agreement for Singapore and India is 0%, assuming the rules of origin are met, which is this is the rule. And so if you look at like India and Thailand, I don't know. Actually, I'm not sure whether India and Thailand have a bilateral agreement, but it seems to imply so here. So what I'm reading is India and Thailand have an agreement, and this product is excluded. So if you don't see it, just blank. That's what it means. Just like excluded in their agreement, if there's one. Okay, and next question. Okay, so the next question was that this company heard that they can use ASEAN India for a customer in Vietnam who will eventually export to India. That is true. So the FTA that will be applied, right, always depends on the origin country and the importing country. So if it's like from made in Vietnam and it's going to India, definitely you can use the ASEAN India FTA. If it goes through Singapore, so from Vietnam through Singapore to India, so Vietnam, Singapore, India, and in Singapore, right, you are just re-exporting, then the origin always falls back to the manufacturing country, and the ASEAN India FTA can apply. Okay, the next question is also related
there's
to...
one...
Sorry, Mian.
Clarify that. Okay, you go ahead first.
So this one asks like whether the Tariff Finder shows which FTA provisions applies for, like, for example, back-to-back. So just for the benefit of everyone, back-to-back basically just means that you are using a regional agreement and you are re-exporting through a member country. So for example, like the ultimate country is to India and it's manufactured in Vietnam. So it's Vietnam to Singapore and then to India. And that's back-to-back because through Singapore you re-export, and from Singapore Customs you obtain something called a back-to-back certificate. It's just re-exporting through is what it means. So it's a certificate based on an original certificate, and it's for a re-export model. The Tariff Finder does not tell you that because back-to-back typically applies for regional agreements only. You cannot do back-to-back for bilateral agreements between two countries. So what the Tariff Finder does is simply like, you just have to know, and that's why we thought it was important to go through the FTA concepts, right? Because if you do a back-to-back, meaning you re-export to a country, it doesn't mean that this box here, right, on my screen should be the exporting country. It should always be the country of origin. Okay, so assuming you're using a back-to-back, right, you want to know how much your Indian importer is paying, you should always put in where it was made in, for example, Vietnam. Yeah, so it doesn't tell you directly that it's a back-to-back, but we know that back-to-back is a concept for regional agreements instead of bilateral. Yeah.
Okay, yep. There is one question on which is the regional value content rule. So is it the importing country that will audit and vet the accuracy of the RVC, the regional value content? Okay, so if company is using the regional value content rule of origin criteria, they will have to submit a manufacturing cost statement. And if this application or if this manufacturing is in Singapore, the manufacturing cost statement is actually submitted to Singapore Customs, okay, who will either who will give you a letter saying that you have met the rules of origin criteria. Okay, so in at this point, it is not audited or vetted by the importing customs authority. However, after the goods has entered the importing country and enjoyed the preferential tariff treatment, it can be immediately or it can be sometime later. The customs authority can do a post-audit check. Okay, so in this sense, when there is such an audit check, right, usually the importer will be the one that will get the notification. And of course, importer in this case will then liaise with the exporter because they wouldn't have the information. Hence, it really depends. In this case, you can actually engage or speak to Singapore Customs to help to facilitate this post-audit.
Yeah.
So it's also very important that if you're using FTA, using regional value content, to keep all the supporting documents. So if you have materials that you import from ASEAN country and is originating from ASEAN, you need to keep the invoices and the respective forms as well. Like for example, the Form D or Form E, if those are considered as originating from ASEAN. Okay, so these will be your supporting documents, and you never know when you'll be asked to show it to Singapore Customs.
Yeah. Thanks, Min. Yeah, and also just wanted to add like one final, I guess, a remark. You know how we mentioned that different FTAs have different rules of origin, and it's important to check the rules. And this also is the same for like different products. So you have a product that you want to export. Maybe it's an electronic product you export overseas and you want to use FTAs. Note that one FTA offering you a preferential treatment doesn't mean that another agreement will do the same, because agreements are among different countries, and it really depends on what was agreed in the legal text and for that particular agreement. So every FTA should be treated independently, and it should be read independently as well. So I just wanted to add that as a remark as well, because that's also a frequently asked question by companies.
Okay.
Okay, so we have another question that just came in. So this company mentioned that they have a lot of products from China, and it was shipped to Australia. And from Australia, the goods are shipped again and then back to Singapore. So basically, it's from made in China, shipped to Australia, and then shipped to Singapore. And the question is it still wrong to declare the goods as Australia origin? Yes, because the goods should be of Chinese origin. Shipping through a country does not mean that the product has changed the origin. I give you an example, right? Okay, so let's say a company in Singapore, right, bought nuts in bulk, like cashew nuts in bulk, and then we simply like re-export the nuts to another country through Singapore. The nuts will still be of, maybe I bought it from US, it will still be of US origin. So shipping through Singapore, right, for example, doesn't change the origin or where it came from. I also like to share an example, like, you know how we travel and we transit through a country, like when we transit through a country, it doesn't like change our citizenship. So it's like the same for goods as well. Yeah. So hopefully that answered the question. At this point, we have no more.
I think we have answered all the questions. But if you have more, feel free to drop us an email or send the email to the chat, through the chat, where I think SBF has actually indicated the email address.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mayan. Thank you, Tricia. Right now, I would like to launch a poll in front of you, and we actually seek your kind assistance to complete the poll, while I would like to go through some of the other FTA resources that you can refer to beside the Tariff Finder. You can actually read up on FTA, which MTI has published a booklet which shows the infographic of some FTA. Then you can also visit fta.gov.sg, which you can find the legal text of Singapore FTA. Singapore Custom website, which is very important, and I strongly recommend you to be familiar with Custom web page because there's a wealth of information, such as information on certificate of origin, circulars, and also notice on TradeNet related issues. For companies who are looking for support when engaging third-party consultants to assist in leveraging FTA to export their products to new market, ESG Market Readiness Assistance, or the MRA grant, is able to support up to 70% of the eligible costs. So for eligibility criteria and more details, please kindly refer to ESG website, or you may scan the QR code to find out more. At SBF, we provide one-to-one FTA advisory service, so do write to us at fta@sbf.org.sg for any FTA-related queries. We also regularly conduct FTA trainings and seminars, hence keep a lookout at our SBF website. In partnership with Enterprise Singapore, Global Connect at SBF has been set up to assist Singapore enterprises who are looking to internationalize for the first time, as well as enterprises who are expanding and deepening their presence in key Southeast Asian markets, such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, or Myanmar, and emerging markets like Africa, Middle East, or Central Asia. There is a team of market advisors to assist SME through face-to-face market advisory service. SME can also expect to benefit from other services such as FTA education and advisory, market insights and research, networking opportunity, business matching to overseas contacts, and referrals to in-market consultants, partners, and government contacts. So that's a wrap. If you have any other further questions on FTA, or you would like to provide feedback as to what you would like to see in our events, such as deeper dive into any other areas of FTA, you can email us at fta@sbf.org.sg. At SBF, we also regularly conduct FTA training courses that will cover more content and details of the rules of origin, such as permission, accumulation, and any other topics in FTA. So do keep a lookout for these courses in our FTA website or join our FTA mailing list for any updates on the event. Lastly, as mentioned, the slides will be sent to you after the webinar. And we want to say a big thank you to all of you for your support in our webinar. And also thank you to Tricia and Mei Yan to speak today. So please stay safe, take care, and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.